Now, do you speak any languages over there or over here?
I just speak Russian. I had to learn it after going over there so many times, and I learned it.
How many different tribes over there did you visit?
Well, that's what's so interesting. You'd mentioned that we talked about the commonality of the petroglyphs. It's also, we think of in North America the 500 nations, 500 nations over there too.
Really?
Yeah, that there's all of these unknown Siberian tribes, some of which only have four speaking members left. Unfortunately, a bunch of them are extinct. And then you have others that have 50,000, 75,000. Even like the Navajos, you could make a parallel between the Buryat and the Navajo that have a few hundred thousand people.
So, how did you get started on this journey?
um, I mean, the short answer, because we could spend a lot of time on that, is that I've always felt this. I'm glad you used the term evolution before. I had some experiences when I was in my teens and 20s where I felt like I was part of this bigger evolutionary pulse or force that's going on, that my body will be here for like a nanosecond, but there's this huge thing that's going on, and that I always felt like I couldn't lead a satisfying life. I couldn't be happy with myself unless I was taking part in that bigger picture. I couldn't be fulfilled. And I mean, to be very specific, so I started working on peace and environmental issues in the middle and late 80s, and started an organization called Sacred Earth Network. And we were fortunate enough to get some grant money to hook uh, pre and post Soviet environmentalists onto email and have internet access just as it was coming online for North Americans. So it's kind of this amazing process. In fact, maybe one of the highlights of my life was first helping to create internet access with an environmentalist in Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg, with people in San Francisco. And when the messages start, we take email for granted right now, but back then, when it was first happening and it was happening on an international level, it was extraordinary. You felt like you were like the first man in space or something.
How long have you connected the indigenous people here with the indigenous people there? And has that been going on for?
Well, it was a project that Sacred Earth Network took on at the end of the 90s. In its heyday, it had a kind of 7 or 8 year window. Pretty much the first 7 or 8 years of the 2000s, where you had a lot of native peoples going back and forth,
Mm-hmm.
and a bunch of that initiated by Sacred Earth Network. Something I'm really proud of.
What have the tribes benefited from being in touch with each other?
Personal and cultural empowerment, and uh, more ways of thinking about how to preserve their land. Meaning, there's a tremendous amount of legislation that was passed in this country that, at least on the books, uh, is very powerful and effective and well articulated. Whereas you had the Russians, or the native peoples, going through this 70-year period of communism where there was really no rights at all. I mean, no legislation whatsoever, no recognition that native peoples are even native peoples, that they were called like the small peoples of the North or something like that. But during the communist period, it was like their attitude was, we're just all one happy family here, and you don't have a right to have your, real cultural differences, which are mostly about self-determination on one's land. And so that was unheard of. So then when they started meeting the Native Americans, it was like, oh yeah, you guys have been dealing with this for a few hundred years. We've got a bunch to learn from you. So I feel really good about all of the learning and education that actually I'm going to say how it happened on both sides. So that the native Siberians really learned so much about the Native American experience of dealing with this huge, dominator, conquistador culture called the United States. And interestingly enough, the Native Americans who had just been like so almost, there's a sense of almost being jaded, like having just been like bumping up against this awful stuff for so long, that when the Siberians, for some reason, it was like a kind of a freshness and almost an innocence is a better word than naivete of about half a dozen Native Americans said to me, that's the way we used to live. And they inspire us to kind of go back home and, get off the booze and the gambling and the drug addiction and the bad food and all that sort of stuff, and learn how to live off the land again. And it's not like there aren't a bunch of Native Americans who actually are doing that. But as a whole, the sense was you've got some pretty intact Siberian tribes there. It's not that they're not up against a whole lot of stuff out there, but it's a freshness. It's a sense of like, oh yeah, we're still connected. We're still looking out for each other in a way that, and there's alcoholism out there too. It's not like they don't have problems. They got plenty of problems. It's hard to kind of put it into words other than there's a sort of freshness and an innocence and an eagerness. And after the Soviet period, it was like everything was opening up to them. And I look forward to you and your viewers seeing that little. It's only an 11-minute video of the tribes getting together, but it's powerful.
I bet it is.
Yeah, it's a powerful little film.
Especially since they're so cross-cultural.
Exactly. So it's like they're meeting themselves again after a couple of thousand years of being separated.
And it's so powerful that you were the catalyst.
Well, I helped out, and I was very powerful to be a part of that.
So what have you learned from it?
That's a great question, Gary. Like, what have I learned, from them? I feel like I've learned that we don't have to invent this new culture from scratch. That we've got it. That we know how to do this, and that they remind us, like, they remind all of us that there's a way of life that we need to practice it. And so my book is more than theoretical. It's about getting together and actually experiencing this stuff. Let's do ceremony together. Let's get nature connected. Let's tell each other stories. Let's play. Let's do art and music. And let's bring the elders back in. And it's all it's almost like deciding to, I was going to say, to brush your teeth,
Yeah.
It's just so, or it's like, for me, it's what I learned from them and from other experiences. I think I might have mentioned Joanna Macy, John Seed, John Perkins, some of my other non-native teachers. It's this rediscovery of what it means to be human. So I think that's like, they've helped me feel like the situation is not hopeless, and that we have the keys. If I were to say anything, that would, if I were to make one point, and I want to make it over and over again, we have the keys to a sense of belonging, a deep sense of belonging that isn't, like momentary, but a real
Right.
felt sense of, we're.
Do you feel that shift is coming back?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that was a little part of my book that I was quoting Terence McKenna on, because he uses the term archaic revival. So I think the archaic revival is happening both in native and non-native circles, and it's something to be proud of. And you look at tattooing, and you look at costumes, and you look at in kind of what you think of primal art, and you look at songs that are really based in the earth, and it just goes on and on, and gratitude ceremonies for the earth and the sky, and you just start doing that stuff, and all of a sudden you remember, oh yeah, this is how it really feels to be a human being.